5:31. In attendance tonight, we do have all trustees joining by Microsoft Teams because of our instructions from our local health unit and our local public health realities. We are back to virtual meetings for the time being. We'll keep you updated on that, but we will be meeting virtually for the time being. Trustee Halberstadt will be on the phone with us this evening, so while we may not see his video on the screen, he will be with us by phone this evening. So I'm looking for a mover and a seconder for approval of the agenda this evening. This agenda moved by Trustee Sartori. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Trustee Cook in the chat. Any discussion on approval of the agenda this evening? Any discussion on that? Trustees, a reminder just for everybody, we'll use the chat as much as we can. Unless you have your camera on, I won't be able to see you. So it would be great if we could use chat as much as possible. Wonderful. Seeing and hearing no additions to the agenda, can I get anyone opposed to the agenda in front of us? Anyone opposed to approval of the agenda? Seeing and hearing none, I have a mover and a seconder to convene into private session, moved by Trustee Leclerc, seconded by Trustee Cheen. Anyone opposed to moving into private session this evening? Seeing and hearing none, a reminder for everybody watching, there'll be a kind of a brief break in here where we go to our private session. We'll be back in this public session at 7 o'clock where I will read the attendance again, and then we'll begin with the rest of the public agenda. But I'll see everyone over in our Teams meeting. If you go over into your calendar and click on that link, will be in our private session Teams meeting. See everyone back in here at 7 o'clock. Everybody back to our public session. We did open our meeting with attendance. I'll do that again. So we have all trustees joining us by via Microsoft Teams. Our public health unit has given us letters of instruction that that meetings should be virtual whenever possible to protect public health, and so we're back virtual for the time being. We do have one trustee joining us by phone this evening, Trustee Halberstadt, and I'm going to turn it over to Director Kelly, who's going to introduce us to a new member of our team tonight.
Sure. Thank you very much, Chair Higginson. It's my pleasure to introduce Roz Salvador, who has joined the Greater Essex County District School Board and began as our Human Rights and Equity System Advisor on Monday, December 13th. In this newly created role, they will lead the implementation of Greater Essex County District School Board's Equity Action Plan in support of student achievement and well-being, while continuing to build a culture of respect for the principles of human rights and equity throughout our district. They will develop and deliver and champion the application of equity-minded policies within the board. And Roz will directly report to the Director of Education and will serve on the senior leadership team. In addition to being a human rights lawyer, Roz's experience includes serving as a senior human rights policy, education, and organizational change specialist at the Toronto District School Board for the last 2 years. So please join me in welcoming Roz.
Welcome, Roz. We're very pleased to have you as part of the team, and it's so wonderful to do so just before the holidays to welcome you. And we're very much looking forward to everything that you're going to bring to this very important work that we're embarking on here. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for the very warm welcome. I am super excited to be here.
It's great. That's wonderful. Wonderful. All right, so we'll move forward through our agenda with our land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge that we are on land and surrounded by water originally inhabited by Indigenous peoples who have traveled this area since time immemorial. This territory is within the lands honored by the Wampum Treaties, agreements between the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenni Lenape, and allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Specifically, we would like to acknowledge the presence of the Three Fires Confederacy, the Ojibwe, the Odawa, the Potawatomi, and Huron-Wendat peoples. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture while remaining committed to moving forward respectfully with all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. I will turn it over to Director Kelly for our special order of the day.
Thank you, Chair Higginson. For the tribute this evening, it is with profound sadness that we share the sudden and tragic loss of Dr. Melanie Freeman. Dr. Freeman began working for the Greater Essex County District School Board in September 2016 as a psychologist. She was proud to work for the very same board that her father, Doug Freeman, had served as a teacher for many years. Even though Melanie was with the board for only a short period of time, she made a huge impact on our system. She was kind, sincere, and soft-spoken, with a quiet sense of humor and a warmth that made her approachable by all. She had a gift for taking complex information and making it understandable so that educators and caregivers could use it to support children, classrooms, and families. The board was fortunate to benefit from her expertise, particularly in the areas such as giftedness and fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Melanie was an anchoring force in the psychological services team. When asked for her opinion or suggestions, she would provide the most insightful and thoughtful responses, taking everything into consideration and always returning the focus to the best ways to support the student, family, and educators. Melanie will be missed and remembered fondly by the students, families, and colleagues whose lives she impacted, and it is with great pride that we celebrate her life and the time and the gifts that she shared with us. Please join me in a moment of silence for Melanie. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Kelly, and our condolences to Dr. Freeman's family and friends. Thank you very much for that. Moving through our agenda, we are at declarations of conflict of interest. Do we have any declarations of conflict of interest for in here, trustees? Any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing and hearing none. Actions of the board meeting private session. Trustee Cook.
Thank you, Chair Higginson. Item H2, may I have a mover for item H2? Trustee Sipkar, seconded by Trustee Satori. Anyone opposed? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving down to G, we are at G1 and G2. Are we okay with moving both of these together, trustees? The minutes from the public board meeting on November 16th and our organizational meeting just last week. I see a mover, Trustee Leclerc, and seconded by Trustee Sartori. Any discussion on moving those minutes? Any discussion? Anyone opposed to moving those minutes? Seeing and hearing none, that passes. Thank you, trustees. Any business arising from either of those two items? Any business arising from the minutes of the organizational meeting and also the November 16th board meeting? Seeing and hearing none, thank you, trustees. We're moving on to presentation. We have our student trustee presentation. Who's going first this evening?
That would be me.
Student trustee McCowie, go ahead and get us started.
Thank you, Chair Higginson. Good evening, Director Kelly, the Board of Trustees, and Senior Administration. These past few months have been an exciting learning experience for both Paige and I. We have enjoyed the great pleasure of meeting with secondary students across the GEC DSB and have enjoyed meaningful discussions. As we come to the end of the semester, we would like to acknowledge that the modified semestered model has been challenging for some secondary school students in terms of their understanding and application of the curriculum content. Students are continuously adjusting and overcoming countless adversities in an effort to succeed. We as student trustees would like to lend our support for a return to the regular semester in-person learning model to support the well-being and success of our students. The Student Trustee Election Procedure Committee, too, has done exceptional work to develop a procedure for the new election process. We are pleased that the Policy Committee has recommended approval of the revised Student Trustee Policy and Regulation. Thank you to both Michelle Marquez and Superintendent Corbach for their support and guidance throughout this unique experience. And thank you to our dedicated and hardworking committee members. Paige and I were excited to welcome Student Senate to our first ever in-person meeting of the year hosted at Vincent Massey Secondary School. Student senators were excited to share ongoing initiatives at their schools. I'd like to take the time to provide some holiday highlights from our secondary schools. Students at Vincent Massey have done great work in spreading holiday cheer. While they weren't able to host their traditional children's Christmas party, they've introduced Massey Christmas Delivery. In partnering with GEC DSB elementary schools, Massey students bought and wrapped Christmas gifts for students in the Windsor-Essex community. These gifts will be delivered to schools later this week, where students will also be greeted by Santa. The leadership class is excited to announce they've raised over 10,000 food cans for food banks in Windsor-Essex. At General Amherst, they held a toy drive in which over 500 gifts were donated for the Little Hands Kids for a Cause organization. The annual reindeer run was held at Kingsville District Secondary School. Students who made a contribution to the Children's Aid Society went on a 5-kilometer walk around the town. The school raised over $10,000 this year. Kennedy Collegiate staff is hosting their traditional pancake breakfast that features staff cooking up the most important meal of the day for students. Student Council is having a number of events, including an ugly sweater fashion show with fun incentives, a toy drive, and is selling candygrams with all proceeds going to charities. Students also made cards for the KCI Kindness campaign, which were distributed to local retirement homes. Students at Riverside held a can drive and sold candygrams with all proceeds going to the Hiatus House. Students were also excited to decorate their school with the festive Christmas cheer. Essex held their reindeer games in which students competed in holiday-themed competitions. They also held the 12 Days of Christmas Spirit Week. Bell River is hosting a virtual pep rally for their students and has adopted a family for the holidays. Student Senate's holiday giving activity is a donation to the Windsor Youth Center. It provides young people aged 16 to 25 with essentials like food and hygiene items, as well as opportunities to develop their personal identity and growth opportunities in a safe place. Paige and I will continue to work alongside the Board of Trustees and senior administration to represent the student body to the best of our abilities. As always, we thank senior administration, the Board of Trustees, and Director Kelly for their continued support. We would like to also thank Michelle Marquez and Superintendent Corbach for all their work in helping us navigate our roles and support us throughout our terms. I'd now like to pass it over to Student Trustee Hawkins for the Student of the Month.
Thank you. It is my honor this evening to announce the Student of the Month for December is Katie Lenover, a grade 12 student from Walkerville Collegiate Institute. Katie is a WCCA Media Arts student and exemplifies this month's theme of collaboration. A talented and well-rounded student athlete, Katie is captain of Walkerville's senior girls basketball team, plays hockey, has been a member of the swim team, and also takes dance classes. As both a team captain and a player, Katie consistently practices collaboration and fosters a culture of inclusion and respect among her teammates. Katie is kind and supportive and knows how to guide others to be successful. A natural leader, Katie is often found helping her fellow students in class to understand the course material and concepts. There is a sense of community as students work together, which benefits everyone involved. As a proud community member, Katie does her part by picking up garbage and keeping the Walkerville campus clean. Overall, Katie is collaborative in every sense of the word. She radiates positive energy, inspires others to achieve their best, and lifts the spirits of the Walkerville school community. Congratulations, Katie, on being selected as Student Senate Student of the Month for December. Thank you very much. And congratulations to Katie. I think we can all appreciate how essential collaboration is, and so I'm so grateful to have that be the theme this month. And congratulations to Katie. And thank you both for that report. Do we have any questions of clarification from trustees for our student trustees this evening? Any questions for our student trustees? Seeing and hearing none, thank you both so much, and happy holidays to you both as you get through the last of your classes this week, and get ready for your holidays. So happy to have you back in January with us. Going through our agenda here, we have no delegations and no one on the speakers list this evening. So we're moving on to L1. So we're new business now. L1 for policy and regulation student trustee, which we just heard our student trustees refer to in their.
Unknown participant is now joining.
Greater Essex County District School Board, please leave a message so I get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you.
After leaving a message, you can hang up or press pound.
Unknown participant is now exiting.
I 100% would like to leave Alan Halberstadt a message on there. We could all sing, I don't know, Merry Christmas.
Sorry about that. I'm trying to get him connected.
Happy to have him be able to join us. All right, back to that was some levity. I appreciate that, Trustee Halberstadt. Okay, so we're looking for someone to move and second our student trustee policy and regulation. I have a mover, Trustee Burgess, seconded by Trustee Sipcar. Any discussion on this policy and regulation? Looking to approve a new policy and regulation for student trustees. Question, Trustee Cheen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question regarding the student trustee policy and regulation, and actually, as I already said before, my main concern is that the election is will be like a popularity contest, like because we have moved all the previous selection criteria, and is based on election, especially on the election of Senate, student Senate, and so I do worry about this. If in the future, certain popular group might dominate the election, so that's my main concern. And I have another, there on the page 31, 31st, there is the regulation will be reviewed in the spring of 2022 after completion of this year's student trustee election. But on page 33, and the review date, next review year is 2025. 26. So I wonder if it's consistent. And also on the page policy, page 1 of 2, student trustee, and that's it's written regulation R-GV-01 is kind of not consistent with the item on this page. So I have more questions. I wonder if you have any comments on that.
So Trustee Cheen, are you asking, I'm kind of unclear on the question. Is it for Superintendent Korbach to talk about the review of the policy, the kind of review timetable of this policy?
Yeah, first question is regarding my concerns that we totally changed from selection to election, and we moved all the criteria like the basic their performance in study or something. So we moved everything and totally based on the election. So I kind of have a concern it will be like a selection.
Yeah, I'm going to allow Superintendent Korbach to answer that question.
Hi, good evening, everyone, and thank you for the question through you, Madam Chair. So I think I will start by saying that the previous policy and regulation related to student trustees called for an appointment process. The government regulation is quite clear that student trustees shall, which means they must be elected either directly by students of the board or by representative student bodies like student councils or student senate. So we have a responsibility to ensure that the process is consistent with the government regulation, which calls for an election and not an appointment process. I think I will defer to either student trustee Hawkins or student trustee McCowie to address the concerns about whether or not this will become a popularity contest, because they have worked very hard to create a fair, transparent, and representative process. But since they were at the center of the work, I think it would be most appropriate for them to speak to that.
Student trustee McCowie, you had your hand up there. Go ahead.
Thank you. I really quickly just want to echo what Superintendent Corback said. This definitely is a process that Student Senate worked diligently to create, and it is one that we believe is fair and equitable, that was vastly student-driven. So in terms of it becoming a popularity contest, that isn't necessarily a concern that we believe will be the outcome of the election process. We do understand that it must be an election by representatives of the student body. In this case, it will be Student Senate. And to say that we got rid of those, quote, basic requirements, we didn't. So there is a declaration of interest students will have to fill out, which is very detailed in the administrative procedure. That clearly lays out the skills and responsibilities and different kind of components of what it means to be a student trustee. And moreover, these students are being vetted by their student councils and their student senators who were elected by their peers at their individual school level to represent students. To say it's going to become a popularity contest is to kind of hinge at the fact that we're not trusting the votes of our student body representatives, and I don't think that's necessarily right. And we should be, hopeful and understand that the student senators at the Senate meeting that will be voting for our student trustees, will vote, knowledgeably and will make those educated votes for who they wish to best represent them. And something that kind of we discussed at policy committee is when we use the word popular, we have to kind of just remember that kids who are quote unquote popular are necessarily well liked. And we would of course want our student trustee to be that person who is well liked, who goes out of their way to, be friends with everybody. So I wouldn't say that this is going to be turning into a popularity contest. And there's definitely a lot of safeguards in place that are very detailed. And again, the administrative procedure that kind of, sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there, that kind of prevents that from happening. So I kind of hope that answered your question.
Thank you, student trustee McCowie. And did you have a supplemental, trustee Ching?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the explanation. And the reason I brought it up is because I do have parents complain to me that when her child went to go to the election for the student council, and they complained that it's kind of dominated by certain group because of the popularity. So that makes me concerned about it. And as for the election procedure, and on page 33, there are it's mentioned that student trustees shall be elected in one of the following ways. The first is directly
Unknown participant is now
This is
joining.
Alan Halberstadt, trustee, Greater Essex County District School Board. Please leave a message.
Okay.
Unknown participant is now exiting.
Okay. First is directly, following two ways. First is directly by students of the board, and second is indirectly by student representative bodies, such as student councils. So I understand there are two ways that we can choose, either directly or and and or indirectly. But after that, on item 5, 5.4, and it's kind of restrict the method to be indirectly. That means that a direct election by the students, and then from the candidates, it was chosen by the student council, student senate. So I just think that there might be some misunderstanding, and second, that the previous procedure and the following description is not consistent, and also
is there a supplemental question, Trustee Chain?
Okay.
Is that a supplemental question? I didn't hear a question in there.
You're asking me?
Point of order, Madam Chair. I think this is, I think it's on the floor, is it not?
It is.
So it can be debated. I don't think it has to be a question. I think you can make commentary and debate.
We're at supplemental questions. So there should be a supplemental question from the first question, yes.
Yeah, I welcome debate.
The question about the discrepancy between the that it says directly or indirectly? Sure.
Yeah.
Superintendent Korbach or either student trustee, Superintendent Korbach, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I think I can handle that question. Thank you for the question, Trustee Cheen, and through you, Madam Chair. So I think in either case, whether it's directly by the students of the board, which would be a full-scale student election from across the system, or indirectly by student representative bodies, in both cases, it is students making the decision around the election of student trustees. So in this case, there's a two-phase process of student bodies having a say in the student trustee election. So there is the first phase, which designates the candidates from each school. And in the case that that does need to be determined, that will be determined by student councils at the school level. And then student senate, as a representative student body, will conduct the election that will ultimately determine the two student trustees at the student senate level. So in both cases, those are representative bodies that are making the determination for how the student trustees are elected.
Thank you very much. Moving down my, if you have a second question, Trustee Cheen, I'm happy to put you on the list for second questions. Would you like me to do that?
Yeah, sure.
Great. Trustee Sipkar and then Trustee Burgess. Go ahead, Trustee Sipkar.
Hi, yes, I was just going to invite our administration and our student trustees to speak to it first. My comment didn't get in the chat as quickly as I would have liked. I think some of the debate already has teased that out as to why we are changing the policy and the background behind it. But I would invite any trustees, if they have any questions, to just direct them to Superintendent Korbach or student trustees. So thank you. Sorry, I was hoping for a presentation, but my comment didn't get there quick enough.
Thanks, I appreciate that. Trustee Burgess and then Trustee Hatfield. Go ahead, Trustee Burgess.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I support this policy and I support the reg. And I think that we have a mechanism after we have our first go at this in the spring to have a good timely look at it again. And if it needs a bit of adjustment, the Student Senate can do that by 2/3 vote, which is, I think, where it should happen. So I would like to just ask a question about number 10, however. I wasn't able to attend the policy committee meeting where this was discussed, though I have to say that I have been following this in depth with student trustees and prior student trustees, et cetera, for some time, so I'm very happy with the vetting of it. But number 10, student trustees may not be absent from 3 consecutive board meetings without authorization of the chair of the board. I'm wondering if that should be not absent without regrets, or is it at all times? Is that on regular board meetings, what we consider regular board meetings, or is that on what we consider committee night board meetings? And why just the chair and not the board?
Superintendent Corbach, would you like to answer that one?
So that is an item, thank you, Trustee Burgess, and through you, Madam Chair. That is an item that existed in the previous policy that both
unknown participant is now joining.
Both our committee and Student Senate, when we took this regulation to Student Senate for their approval, and as well as the trustee election committee, felt was a reasonable expectation of student trustees that they not be absent for more than 3 consecutive board meetings without authorization. Just speaks to the importance of the role, the importance of treating the role with responsibility. So we felt that was a reasonable expectation, and certainly speaks to the important role that our student trustees play in their attendance in board meetings.
So supplemental, we have looked at every single piece of this, and I know it was in before, but I just wonder if it needs authorization from the whole board, like we normally would with authorized absences. And I would say not absent without regrets. I think you can give regrets, and if regrets meet the criteria, then it meets the criteria.
I see Director Kelly, her hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to speak to that. Thank you, Trustee Burgess, through you, Madam Chair. I think the authorization for students may be that there are some last minute things like examinations. I'm not so sure we would go through a formal authorization process like we might do for trustees. So I think that would probably be the thinking around it, that there might be some more last minute things which I believe the chair could handle, just my thinking.
Thank you for that. I see Trustee Hatfield has, Trustee Hatfield, I see that you have 2 questions. I'll invite you to ask one, and then I'll put you on the list for second questions. But go ahead, Trustee Hatfield.
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. So first, let me say that I actually had more than 2 questions, but I did send them in prior to the meeting through Trustee Sipcar, and I appreciate that I did get responses to my questions, but I still have a couple things that didn't quite get clarified for me. So the first is on page 33 of the regulation 5.1, and it's I guess you could say it's a language thing for me, or I don't think it's being expressed as clearly as it could be. So I'm going to propose an amendment to change the wording of 5.1. It's just one sentence, but when I did send in my questions, I couldn't understand what it was saying, that the students had to submit an expression of interest provided by Student Senate. I've come to learn that it means that it's a form. So I wanted to change that sentence for clarification purposes to read, oh, and the tag at the end, to their principal or designate. I'm not sure that provided by Student Senate to their principal or designate, or if it's the student who's providing something to the principal or their designate. So I'd like to change the sentence around to read this. Eligible secondary students shall submit an expression of interest to their principal or designate using the form provided by Student Senate for the position of student trustee. I see some heads nodding yes. I think it just makes it more understandable.
I'm seeing support for that amendment. Give me 2 seconds here. They're covering up my chat. So I'm seeing support. So I've got that motion has come on the floor for that amendment. It's been seconded. Any discussion on that amendment?
If I could just say, I don't think, based on the response that I got today earlier when I put my questions out there, I don't think I've changed the intent in any way. I've just clarified what that step means.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Trustee Sipcar, go ahead.
Yeah, just to speak to the amendment quickly. Yeah, thank you, Trustee Hatfield. I do think that clarifies that sentence. It was one of the ones we were struggling with actually at the policy committee, so I appreciate the amendment. And also just to clarify, the reason for it is because so that it is a standardized form across all schools in the district, so that the expression of interest is consistent and it's not just at the whim of a principal, adding questions or taking away questions, but that it's a standardized document. So I think your amendment clarifies that perfectly. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on that amendment? Seeing and hearing none. Anyone opposed? I do see lots of support in there. Anyone opposed to that amendment? So that amendment passes. We're back to the main motion. So I do have second questions here from, I have a first question from Trustee Leclerc before I get to the second questions. Go ahead, Trustee Leclerc.
Thank you. So I'm just wondering how we're going to address situations where smaller schools versus larger schools, in terms of larger schools controlling the vote and the size of the vote. Are the schools going to have a weighted number based on the number of students, so each school has an equal opportunity to send representation?
Superintendent Korbach or student trustees, do you want to?
I'll start. Thank you, Trustee Leclerc, for the question, and through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, the Student Election Senate Committee talked about that at length, and I think have come up with a very reasonable and fair solution to that concern. So I will turn it over to either Student Trustee Hawkins or Student Trustee McCowie to answer that question.
So in terms of the voting procedures for the position, when there are more than 3 candidates who express interest at an individual school, they'll go through a vetting process at their individual school, and then those names will be submitted to Student Senate, where round 2 of the elections will take place. But at round 2, each school in the district, each secondary school, will send 3 voting delegates on behalf of the school to be their votes. So at the end of the day, each school has the same amount of votes, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. Any first questions from trustees before I move on to our second? Trustee Burgess, I'll put you in the queue for second questions. Trustee Chin, you can go ahead with your second question.
Okay, before I have second question, I just have a comment regarding the answer just now regarding.
No, that question was not put to you. You can ask a question. You can ask your second question.
Okay. Okay, my second question is regarding the conflict of interest, because during the election procedure, and it was kind of decided by the Student Senate. And as far as I know, Student Senate is the volunteer from the Student Council, the students. And the Student Council is based on kind of popularity system to be elected, to be formed. And the chair of the Student Senate should be based on the rules number, I think the number 15. The chair of the Student Council, not number 15. The chair of the Student Senate should be the student trustee, and the student trustee can go re-election. So all this kind of, and I foresee that most of the some of the candidates might come from the Student Senate. So if the Student Senate made a decision on the second round, is there any, conflict of interest of those issues? Because they kind of join the election and they decide who is elected by their own voting instead of the overall student voting. Do you understand what I mean?
Thank you. Superintendent Corbach, through you to it can go to you or to, I see Paige has her, student trustee Hawkins, pardon me, has her hand up as well.
Yes, thank you for the question, Trustee Cheen. And through you, Madam Chair, I will turn it over to Student Trustee Hawkins to address that question.
Thank you. In terms of having a conflict of interest when deciding our procedure for this, the committee asked that any members who planned on seeking the position in this year excuse themselves from the meeting at any point where we might see that there would be an unfair advantage to them hearing the conversations going on within the committee. And with that being said, anybody running for the position of student trustee must be in grade 10 or 11, and majority of the committee was students in grade 12 who wouldn't be eligible anyways, aside from myself and one other student who excused ourselves from conversations which might put us at an unfair advantage in terms of the election.
Thank you. Go ahead with a supplemental. Yeah. Yes.
I understand the explanation. I just want to see more, a procedure be more, be more ready for this kind of issues, because we cannot just, see that most of the time is grade 12, and sometimes, but we are doing the policy and the procedure. So I would rather that the whole procedure to be, polished to make sure that in those cases, what we are going to do and to avoid further conflict. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Trustee Hatfield, did you have your second question? Trustee Cook, I see your question in there. I'm going to go through the queue here that we've got. Trustee Hatfield and then Trustee Burgess.
Yeah. So the second question that I still just require a little bit of clarification is on page 34, number 8. And this is about a student trustee being able to suggest a motion at any board meeting or committee meeting, and that if the suggested motion doesn't actually get put on the floor, that is by being properly moved and seconded by a trustee, then it says the record shall show the suggested motion. So I just want to clarify here that the record, we're talking about the minutes of a board or committee meeting.
Superintendent Corbett?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Trustee Hatfield. And through you, Madam Chair, that language is taken directly from the Education Act around motions and how they're dealt with through student trustees. Certainly, I don't see any issue with calling it the minutes rather than the record. We would have to remove the quotation marks or perhaps put that in square brackets to indicate that it is not the language directly from the Education Act. But I don't see any reason why that would impact the spirit of that particular item. But I'm happy to turn it over to the student trustees if they have any other questions or concerns about that.
Student trustees, is there anything you wanted to add about that?
Like Superintendent Corbett said, it was taken directly from the Education Act, and in all honesty, when Paige and I attended the OSTA Fall General Meeting, we didn't even entirely know that was one of our rights as student trustees until we had some professional development in, and we had looked at the Education Act, and we're just hoping to add that in there for clarification purposes for future student trustees to come, as the Education Act can be quite a lengthy document and pretty hard to interpret at times. But if we wanted to change the wording of record to minutes, I see no problem with that.
Supplementary to that, because that's not my full point of clarification, it's just part of it. So what I was trying to understand here is like what I'm trying to equate this to when trustees put forward a motion that doesn't have a seconder and it's lost. Like, so are our motions that don't make it to a seconder, like don't get properly moved, are they reflected in the minutes? Like, how does this, I'm just trying to understand how this gets reflected as a suggested motion. Like, is it a notice of motion? In which case, if it's a notice of motion, it does get recorded in the minutes. But then when it actually comes to the meeting to be put forward, it wouldn't have a mover and seconder, but yet it would actually be reflected because it was a notice of motion. So I'm trying to understand what this looks like, because I really don't understand what it looks like.
Sure. It looks like Director Kelly has her hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it's reasonable to try to figure this out. And I'm wondering, Ms. LeBouf, would you have an opinion on this as you do the minutes and are an expert in the motions? So would you have a suggestion about how that might be reflected?
Sure. When there's a motion that's put forward that lacks a seconder or is withdrawn, it is not reflected in the minutes because it hasn't actually hit the floor for discussion. So this could be, since it is part of the act that it does need to be reflected in the minutes, it could just be stated that, student trustee so-and-so wanted a motion moved, and state the motion because that's what we need to do, and that there was no mover or seconder.
But that doesn't speak to whether or not there has to be a notice of motion.
I think they fall under the same rules. If they want a motion to come forward, there does need to be a notice of motion. Just like
because I think we have had that in the past where student trustees have put forward notices of motion, because the wording for notice of motion is, that the trustee will move or cause to be moved. And so for student trustees, they have in the past put forward notices of motion under the cause to be moved. So then when it does come on the agenda as new business, they're not actually moving it, but they're looking for someone to move it and second it.
Correct.
So that's, I think, what the procedure should be, is that they still have to serve that notice of motion looking to cause it to be moved.
I think we may be dealing with two different things. There is that notice of motion, and then but there could be motions that come from say reports or things like that as well. I think this is trying to reflect that reality, that there may be that student trustees still aren't able to move a motion, but would like to suggest a motion in that way.
Okay, sorry, I was just thinking that if it's a notice of motion, it is reflected.
Yeah, so a notice of motion, and you're right, we have had that before in our past.
Okay.
Yeah, we have.
Well, then I will propose, just for clarification, another amendment that those last few words say the record, and then could we do in brackets minutes shall show the suggested motion?
So the inclusion of after record bracket minutes close bracket?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the amendment on the floor. Trustees, it's been seconded. Any discussion on that amendment to add after the word record in number 8, there would be a open bracket, the word minutes, and then close bracket. Seeing no discussion on that, I will call a question. Anyone opposed to that amendment? Seeing no one opposed to it, that amendment passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Trustee Burgess, and then I've got Trustee Cook, and then we'll wrap this up and call a question on it. Go ahead, Trustee Burgess.
Thanks, Madam Chair. How do we get or do we have representations, I should say, from students at PASS, or what I still call agency schools, students who are in the alternate learning in high school? Where is their voice?
Superintendent Korbach, do you want to? take that one?
Yeah, and thank you for the question. Through you, Madam Chair. Those schools are represented and would have the same opportunity to participate in Student Senate and send a voting delegation for the purpose of electing student trustees.
Thanks.
Thank you for that. Trustee Cook.
Thank you, Chair Ferguson. I just wanted to say that I'm really glad that this came to us today. It needed to be changed, and this in itself, I think, is somewhat more fair. Everyone has more of a chance. I like the fact that there's a form that they fill out, not an essay. I think that opens the door to more students possibly, putting their name forward. I'm interested to see how this works, and for when it comes back to the board after next year, after the first election. So I'm hoping that this really works out, and I'm hoping that we get some students from different areas, different schools to apply. I'm excited about this and really looking forward to see what happens. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I will wrap it up by echoing some of those thoughts. And I want to just say, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the chair of policy committee, but I know there was quite an extensive collaboration here with Student Senate. Thank you to Superintendent Corbach for facilitating that. Thank you to our two student trustees for having the trust of your peers to be able to have that fulsome conversation and bring that voice back into a decision that we are making on your behalf here. I'm grateful for the fulsome discussion that we did have and the critical look that we had at it. And I think we're on a new path here. I like Trustee Cook. I'm very interested to see how it goes, and I'm really going to be kind of looking forward to the renewed momentum that we may have and we may be able to experience with some of this moving forward, especially with the leadership that we've already seen shown by our current Student Senate. So thank you very much to everyone involved in developing this, and I'm happy to support it. So on the motion in front of us on the policy and regulation for student trustees, anyone opposed? Seeing and hearing none, that passes. Thank you very much. Let me find my way back up to my agenda here. Scroll too far. So now we are at L2, policy and regulation for health and safety, workplace violence, and workplace harassment. You have the recommendation in front of you for that policy and regulation. Do I have a mover and a seconder? That policy and regulation. Do I have I see it moved by Trustee Sipcar. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Trustee Olmsted. I appreciate that. Any discussion on this? Is there any presentation that we need on this one? Superintendent Armstrong? I think there were not many changes to this one, if I'm recalling correctly. Any discussion? Thank you. Any discussion from trustees on this? Seeing and hearing none, I will call the question. Anyone opposed to this policy and regulation, health and safety, workplace violence, and workplace harassment policy and regulation? Anyone opposed? Seeing and hearing none, that passes. Thank you, trustees. Moving right along through our new business here to L3. I see it's been moved by Trustee Hatfield. This is write-off accounts authorization. Our policy and regulation on that's been moved. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Trustee Olmsted. Thank you very much. Do we need a presentation on this? Any questions from trustees on this policy and regulation? Not many changes on this one either, if I recall correctly. I should probably just stay on screen, Superintendent Armstrong. It's me and you. Any questions from Trustee Cheen? Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I still want to ask about the on page 43. Is there anything wrong with my voice? Can you hear?
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, on page 43, I didn't figure out why we change accounts. A report shall be given annually to the board of all invoices. And we change all accounts to invoices greater than 5,000 written off in the previous fiscal year. So to my understanding, invoice greater than 5,000 kind of make the scope, smaller, right? Yeah, thank you.
Armstrong, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I think the purpose of changing the wording from accounts to invoices was just to provide a little bit more flexibility where there may be something that we wish to write off within an individual vendor's account, but not necessarily the entirety of the account. And so that's why that wording was changed.
Thank you very much for that. Any other questions from trustees on this policy and regulation in front of us? That's write-off accounts authorization. All right, seeing and hearing none, I will call the question. Anyone opposed to that policy and regulation write-off accounts authorization? Any opposition to that? Seeing and hearing none, that passes. Thank you very much, trustees. We're moving on to L4, our 21-22 COVID-19 expense projection. I will get Superintendent Armstrong to give us a presentation on that. If trustees are okay with waiting until after the presentation to move in second, I'd like to hear that presentation. It's incredibly important for us right now. So go ahead, Superintendent Armstrong.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to welcome Mr. Mayhew, our Manager of Financial Services. He did a tremendous amount of work in preparing the board's revised estimates, which is our updated budget submission that goes to the Ministry of Education tomorrow. And he did a lot of work on the COVID projection. So when we get to questions, I may be deferring to him for some of the responses. As we've indicated, or as you see in your package, we have provided an update in terms of the COVID-19 expense projections. We previously brought a projection to the board at our October, I believe it was, Operations and Finance Committee meeting. We've updated this based on information that we now know a little bit better than what we did when we did the original budget, which we passed in June, and 1 month after school had started at the beginning of October. Some of the items that helped inform the projection was our survey for students to declare whether they wanted to attend school in a virtual setting. That closed at the end of August, so we were able to get a better understanding of how many students would be participating in our virtual schools. As well, the Ministry of Education announced at the end of the month that the additional 1% of the board's of any school board's operating surplus, plus the other 1/2 of the COVID funding supports, would now be available for use by school boards for the second half of the school year. And so we've reflected in the report to you today the revised funding that is available to school boards and for our board specifically to address COVID-related challenges. Additionally, we are getting a better sense too of the local circumstances of the pandemic and how that seems to be emerging in our community right now. So that's helped provide a little bit more context than what we knew back in June and clearly what we would have known in October. The memo, as I indicated, provides the funding supports. That's been updated, and we've updated the expense projections. And we've also indicated a number of risks that are associated with those projections. One of the largest risks, quite frankly, is going to be absenteeism. We identify that it is challenging, and we see where class cohorts are dismissed. We see where teachers may need to go home. We see instances of community spread of the COVID in our communities. And so that really does have an impact, but it's quite honestly, it's very hard to project too. Just to put some context around it, in 2018-19, which is really, your pre-pandemic year, our occasional costs were $9.6 million. When you get to 2019-20, where we kind of got interrupted by the introduction of COVID, schools were closed for in-person learning for a significant part of the latter half of the year. Those occasional costs were $7.6 million. Then you get to 2020-21, which is the fiscal year we just finished, where schools were open and closed, but we had a virtual school as well. Our occasional costs at that point were $12.1 million. So you can see there's a great deal of increase, decrease, and it's very challenging to put some context, like I said, around that. So certainly we've identified that as a risk in terms of this budget. Additionally, I think we've made an assumption that even though there will be an opportunity for students to choose to opt back into in-person learning in February, or I guess that the surveys come out, it came out this week, we're going to make the assumption, given the state of the pandemic in our region, that no one's going to want to opt back into in-person learning. So we're trying to be very conservative in terms of projecting the costs. We think that's really the best approach in terms of doing that. Some additional information that I can provide as well. Based on the analysis that we've completed, it's pretty clear that the board does need to access the other 1% that is available to the board. So it would be a total of $8.4 million, $8.5 million is what we would need to access from the board's accumulated surplus to address COVID expenses and other system initiatives. The funding, as you'll see, isn't sufficient. There was GSN stabilization funding that the board received last year, and that was approximately $4.2 million. And what that did was that approximated about 1% of our operating surplus last year. So when we got that funding combined with some savings that we incurred because schools were closed, we didn't really have to touch our accumulated surplus at all. But now we're in a situation where the intent is to keep schools open for the total year. And so we're assuming that they will remain open. We don't have that stabilization funding that's available to us. Our enrollment has declined over the last 2 years because, homeschooling, for example, is a situation where we've seen an increase. And it's making obviously very difficult to address the costs. So I just wanted to kind of highlight those key points. A couple other things that I just wanted to draw your attention to is, while the ministry will indicate there is GSN stabilization funding, all that means in terms of this current year is it allows the board to access 2% of its operating surplus. That's what that means. Unless you're a board that does not have any accumulated surplus, that's the only true extra funding that would be available. We've also highlighted in the report the cost of the virtual school. It's significant, but we knew that was the reality of that when we chose that learning model. In terms of the prior year, those costs were about $3 million lower. Even though the enrollment was higher in the virtual setting, it's more difficult to staff to address your class sizes when you have smaller number of students coming from multiple different grades and be efficient from a class size perspective. So that's kind of where you get the challenge, where actually the staffing costs are much higher. So I just wanted to highlight that as well. And then really in terms of the impact on accumulated surplus, when we finished our fiscal year end on August 31st, the board's accumulated surplus was $35.1 million. If we assume we have no in-year surplus or deficit on a regular normal basis, and we have to utilize that 2%, we would project that at the end of August of 2022 that the board's accumulated surplus would drop down to $26.6 billion. And with that, myself and Mr. Mayhew would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much for that. Trustees, I'm looking for a mover and a seconder before we address questions on this. So we have a recommendation in front of us. You have the presentation there. You have a report in your package that's looking for mover and a seconder. I see it's been moved by Trustee Cook, seconded by Trustee Burgess. Thank you very much. I'm looking for any questions of administration from trustees. Trustee Hatfield, go ahead.
Thank you. So I don't know if there's actually an answer to this, but so what happens with boards that don't have a nice surplus to pay for COVID-19 expenses that aren't funded by the ministry? I always express this concern at budget time when we look at spending our surplus, because it's very convenient for the ministry to allow us to do that. But then other boards, they can't ignore their COVID needs or expenses. So how does that get addressed, and where is the fairness? Maybe there is no fairness in this COVID world of ours, but this concerns me that we're dipping into our surplus another 2%. And in my opinion, there's still lots more we could be doing in providing upgraded COVID PPE for staff and different things that I know staff have raised concerns about, but the ministry isn't agreeing to fund these things. So, like, do I want to spend this additional 2% of our surplus? No, I don't. But I guess I'm asking what are my choices, and how are other boards handling this?
Thank you, through Madam Chair. I'll start the answer, and then maybe Mr. Mayhew could chime in. You are correct. I guess I would say that maybe it's not equitable for boards that, which is not to say other boards that don't have accumulated surplus are not responsible boards. It's just, as our board, we've been very fiscally responsible and made it a big effort to build up the accumulated surplus, because you know when an unforeseen circumstance is going to arise and you require the use of it. For boards that don't have appropriate accumulated surplus that's built up, that's where the definition of GSN stabilization funding changes for those boards, where they would in fact actually have access to funding from the Ministry of Education. But for a board such as our board, where we have a healthy accumulated surplus, the expectation would be is that we are using that surplus to fund anything over and above what the COVID funding supports are that we're getting. I can see Mr. Mayhew's come on, so maybe he wants to add to that.
Mr. Mayhew, go ahead.
Thanks, through you, Madam Chair. Yes, I just wanted to add to that just briefly. I would think that boards that are faced with a position where they don't have the accumulated surplus, they would have to go into a deficit recovery plan, I'm assuming. That's one thing, fortunately, because of fiscal planning and prudency on behalf of the board. We've been able to plan for these rainy days. We've been able to build up that accumulated surplus for those rainy days. So fortunately, we don't have to go into a deficit recovery plan as a result of our submission. So we would be in compliance right now with our submission.
Thank you for that. I recall this is not also the first year that we've heard of such things either, and so I feel for other boards across the province who are dealing with these, and I'm grateful for the position that we are in too. Trustee Leclerc, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, in addition to what Mr. Mayhew just mentioned, something that we're avoiding, theoretically, what would the consequences be to the board if we did not pass this evening?
Superintendent Armstrong, Mr. Mayhew.
I can start off through you, Madam Chair. Right now, so going through the revised estimates process, what we've done is we've accounted for all the incremental COVID costs. We've accounted for all the additional staffing needs. And we've what we do is we start with the budget and we perform a revised projection. Based on that revised projection, the costs end up such that we're in this position where we need to access that extra 1%. If we were not to approve that tonight, I'm not sure we'd be in a position to fund our current projections, our expenses. I think the important part here, Shelley mentioned it in her report that she gave, is that in the prior year we did get this significant sum of money as in the form of GSN stabilization, and we have to realize, like, enrollment has gone down over 700 students from 2 years ago. Typically, we would have a declining enrollment grant, which would kick in and would allow us some flexibility in managing those cost structures, but we haven't built up that enrollment back to pre-pandemic levels. So based on similar structures, similar class sizes, and the virtual school especially, we're not in a position where we wouldn't be able to need that funding or the use of the surplus.
Is there anything to add to that, Superintendent Armstrong?
Yeah, I couldn't unmute. You'd think I'd be used to that by now. Further to that, we are going back through budgets right now and looking for ways to cut. We're going to have to kind of do those types of things and question what are we spending and what is really discretionary and what is not. And we're going to have a tight budget year when we get prepared for 22-23, and we know that. And to the extent that we cannot get enrollment figures back up as well, then that's certainly going to be a consideration that we're going to have to factor in as well. If the motion doesn't get passed, then we're filing using the 1%, and we have to find $4 million in the budget to cut. And then that's the reality of it. And some of it is hard. Like I said, some of this stuff is very difficult to project when you get to, for example, absenteeism. And I appreciate that there's enhanced PPE that people would like, but we've also got to be cautious too, right? So, you know, I appreciate it's not a good story to have to share.
Did you have a comment, Trustee Leclerc?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick comment on the answer. I said theoretically because I do support this. We really don't have a choice. It's just truly unfortunate that the province hasn't stepped up. And because we're a have, you know, it's kind of funny. We've heard this at the federal level where you hear, you know, certain provinces aren't happy because they're the haves. We're the haves in this case, but we haven't always been that way. My first couple of years on the board, we really struggled to have any money in our accumulated surplus was very thin. It's actually very scarily thin. And even when you look at what we have now compared to a $500 million budget, it's still not, you know, a massive amount. But anyway.
Oh, are you back? Did we lose Trustee Leclerc?
I don't know what happened there, but I'm here. But I was just finishing up my comment. So it's really province's responsibility, and it's unfortunate that we've been left in this situation. But I know the need is there, and I support the work that our people are doing. And I realize that if there's savings, they're going to find them.
Thank you for that, Trustee Leclerc. And I want to echo a lot of that. And we have sent letters in the past to the ministry outlining these concerns. I am not opposed to doing so again. In fact, I would encourage us to do so again because we are seeing realities that we're having difficulty funding the things that we need to keep schools going and to keep options available for people to maintain their own safety. And yet, as Trustee Leclerc said, as Superintendent Armstrong and Mr. Mayhew have pointed out, there are increased needs that we're seeing as the pandemic moves forward with PPE, with rapid tests, with all of these things. We are struggling, even with a surplus, to be able to be in compliance and fund the things that we need to offer our students and our staff a safe learning environment and a safe working environment. And to me, it's unconscionable that we would be asked to once again dip into our reserves, to once again, to Trustee Hatfield's point earlier, be supporting be supporting ourselves, the supports that should come from the ministry, because we know that there are boards that are not in the strong position that we are, and I want to be able to support Greater Essex students and Greater Essex staff. I also want the rest of Ontario to be supported appropriately, and it's and we know from our local numbers this is not, we're not coming out of this pandemic anytime soon, and so the idea that we have to gratefully have these reserves to dip into over and over and over again when we have increased need, not just static need, we have increased need. And we're seeing mental health concerns going up. We're seeing all of these concerns keep rising with less and less funding. Less and less funding. It doesn't make any sense to me. And so I guess I know from the chair I'm not really supposed to be asking for these sorts of things, but I'm asking for support from my colleagues to send a strong letter to the ministry, to the premier, and I see Trustee Burgess has put in here copying all MPPs and ed critics, etc. To really advocate for the strong work that our board has done in these last years, to Trustee Leclerc's point, to support the work that they've done, to support what our staff needs, to support what our students need, to support what should be available to us continuously, and not having to beg for it, and then asking our own budgets to float the needs of staff and students and what we all need. So I'm looking for some support for a letter tonight by consensus. If anyone is opposed to it, I will put that motion on the floor. I would hope that that we could send a letter in support of this work that our staff has done to be able to get us to this point, as frustrating as it is. Is anyone opposed to sending a letter? Thank you very much. Seeing and hearing none, so that will accompany this. But we are still on this this motion and this report. Do I have any other questions or comments from trustees before I call the vote on this recommendation?
Yeah, Madam Chair, it's Trustee Halberstadt. I have a couple questions.
Go ahead, Trustee Halberstadt. Nice to have you with us tonight.
Yes, on page 40, I guess it's 45. At the top, you're talking about funding and expense projections have been updated to reflect safe operation of schools through protective strategies in the form of student masking, staff PPP, enhanced ventilation measures, and enhanced cleaning. I'm just wondering what enhanced cleaning are we looking at, and why are we spending? I'm assuming we're spending a lot of money on enhanced cleaning, or maybe not. I just like an explanation of that, because more and more people are saying enhanced cleaning is not the answer with regard to fighting COVID.
Superintendent Armstrong.
Certainly, thank you through you, Madam Chair. The enhanced cleaning is the cleaning of high-touch surfaces. or frequently touched surfaces that are required to be done twice per day. That's based on guidance from the Ministry of Education, our local public health unit. And so the costs associated with that would be casual custodian costs or additional custodians that we have that overlap. The day custodian, we've changed the shifting so that custodians are available in the school to clean those surfaces, as well as the appropriate products in order to do the cleaning.
Okay, what about the desk? That's a different
Well, desks
story.
is desks. Through Madam Chair, desks are a high touch surface. So desks, doorknobs, light switches, faucet handles, doorknobs. I don't know if I said doorknobs. Railings on staircases, things of that nature would be cleaned twice a day.
Okay, so are we spending more money on that going forward for this year or next year, 22?
Well, we've updated our projection. Sorry, through you, Madam Chair. We've updated our projection in terms of the casual custodian costs. I don't believe there's a change in the projection in terms of the cleaning products, because we had anticipated all along that would be required. So I don't believe that it would be significant. More of the costing is more on the filters. There's some PPE and cleaning products that we don't get through the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services. So we do have to procure some stuff locally, which would be part of the COVID costs that the board would be incurring.
So do you have a figure on that, like the enhanced cleaning, how much we're going to be spending on that in 2022?
I don't have that directly with me, but I'm happy to follow up on that.
Okay, thank you. At the bottom of that same page,
Trustee Halberstadt, I'm just going to put you, Trustee Halberstadt, just give me 1 second. I'm just going to put you in the queue for second questions. I just want to make sure that somebody else that hasn't had a first question yet is able to do that. If I don't see anything, then I'll come back to you. Thanks. Do any other trustees have first questions or comments? I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Go ahead, Trustee Halberstadt.
Yeah, at the bottom of that same page, there's a mention of mobile device management, internet protocol management, and DD 100,000, $257,000. Have never seen that acronym, DD1. Maybe I have somewhere, but what is that?
Thank you. Just to put, I'm going to actually ask Superintendent Mills, but just to put some context around this, in the ministry funding that was announced at the time we prepared the budget, there was funding for this funding pool called Connectivity Supports for Remote Learners, and that was an application-based funding opportunity, and so the board did submit and received $338,000 of funding. And perhaps Superintendent Mills might be able just to explain a little bit better than I will about that.
So DD1 stands for what?
I'll turn that over to Superintendent Mills.
I think Superintendent Mills is just coming on there.
So what we had done is we had done some wireless access points as part of that funding for increase our connectivity in the schools. And I'm sorry, what page were you on, Trustee Halberstadt?
45, right at the bottom, second last bullet point.
And I can get back to you with a response for that.
Okay.
Superintendent Mills, can you copy trustees on that that email to Trustee Halberstadt as well?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Trustee Halberstadt, did you have a supplemental? I cut you right off there.
No, not at this point. No, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from trustees before I call the question on this motion on the floor here? Seeing and hearing none, I will call the question. we approve a further operating deficit for the purposes of the Ministry of Education compliance calculation of $4,188,281, resulting in a total deficit for the ministry compliance calculation of $8,461,188, representing 2% of the board's operating allocation, and that of the total deficit for compliance calculation purposes of $8,461,188 is to be used to fund COVID-19 expenditures in which no direct ministry funding is available and other systems initiatives. Anyone opposed to that recommendation? And that passes. Thank you again. Thank you. And that letter will go out as well, along with our commitment to keep funding what we need for COVID supports here. Thank you, trustees. I'm looking forward through our agenda here. We are at M1, Report of the Director of Education. Do I have Director Kelly with us? There we are.
Yes, I am here. Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. For the first time, I don't have pictures. This tonight is not a PowerPoint, but a brief message for the season and the circumstances. First of all, it's my hope that everyone enjoys a restful and invigorating holiday break, which starts after school on Friday, in case anybody needs to be reminded. We deserve a nice break. We've been through a lot together. I urge everyone to reflect on the great things that we've been able to accomplish in spite of the restraints of the COVID-19 pandemic. We've accomplished a lot together. The hardships have not been of our making, but the responses have, and they have been creative, considerate, and careful in developing these solutions. Partly because of that, I choose to have great optimism for the future. I encourage everyone to uphold the spirit of the holidays and be thoughtful and be kind. We can show our appreciation for others by continuing to follow all the recommended health and safety guidelines, wearing masks, maintaining physical distance, and avoiding large gatherings. As well, we need to raise the vaccination rate in our region. Clinics have begun for children ages 5 to 11, and the early results have been very promising, with great turnout of families to get their first shots. I hope we'll be able to start the new year in January with great things to look forward to, such as a return to traditional schedules and practices. But that's only going to happen if we work together. I'd like to thank you, the Board of Trustees, senior staff, all Greater Essex County District School Board employees, and especially to our students and to their families. I wish you joy, peace, health, happiness this holiday season and throughout 2022. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Kelly, for that. Any questions for our director this evening from trustees? Thank you for that reminder that we are coming to an end on Friday. I had forgotten. My children do not let me forget. So thank you very much for that. Moving forward in our agenda here to M2, we have a report of our OPSPA director. Welcoming back Trustee Burgess, our OPSPA director.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did circulate an OPSPA report, but for the public, just so that you know, there has been a lot happening as far as meetings and collaboration amongst those who are on different committees, regional meetings, education program work team, policy development work team, and general submissions for all kinds of things that the ministry and other organizations want our opinion on. And Greater Essex has been a part of all of that. We did have a board of directors meeting recently on November 27th, and we had a fairly full agenda. I have provided a summary that OPSPA staff put together. It's fairly comprehensive, so do take a look at it, but you'll see some of the things that we've discussed on tonight's agenda, for example, funding issues, just different things are all reflected in on the board of directors agenda as well. We did have a notice of motion to look at the revision for the oath or affirmation of allegiance found in the Education Act. The Indigenous Trustee Council wasn't able to really convene and discuss that in between the notice and the motion, but they will be. So we've referred that back to them to make sure that we have that very important and collegial consultation, and sometime prior to this next year when the municipal elections happen. Also, we had a Western Regional meeting, policy development work team meeting, a couple of them, most recently on November 30th, and that focused a lot on GSN submissions. There's an infographic, if you don't want to read a whole lot, there's an infographic that OPS was put together, and they're really a nice one-stop shop with looking at some of the numbers and seeing what COVID-related pressures are and what other funding pressures are, and I've attached that to my report and disseminated it to colleagues as well. We did have a regional meeting and subsequent meetings on Project Compass, which is a governance review basically, and they've been very interesting, and I look forward to having that reported in the new year. There is a survey to monitor whether in-person meetings will be taking place. We're looking at it from a sustainability commitment as well as one of just general COVID protocols, etc. So the next one is February 25th and 26th. I'll be attending if we get the all clear. Trustees are also invited to attend the 2022 Public Education Symposium, which will be happening virtually on Friday, January 28th via Zoom. You do need to register, and in my report I have given a link where you can register. We're going to be looking at a lot of really, kind of deep things there, planning for public education and learning. I'm going to say post-COVID, but with COVID, post-COVID, things have changed, and we need to reflect that in our public policy. President Kathy Abraham also distributed a message yesterday updating colleagues on many issues, and I've duplicated it pretty well, just cut and pasted it into my report so you can see many again of the issues that we've talked about tonight and over the last good while, and what OPSPA's advocacy has been. Lots of meetings, lots of collaboration. You can really see a strong advocacy from OPSPA, and we are being listened to, and some things have changed and there has been response. So that's a good thing. And I will just end my report there and wish everyone the same thing, a restful holiday and time to recharge the batteries. And again, we're optimistic that, as the president of OPSPA says, that in 2022 will be full of opportunities for us to continue to work together and make a difference in the lives of students, families, and our communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trustee Burgess, for that. And for highlighting OPSPA's advocacy on behalf of students, staff, and families. I've been quite appreciative of their notifications to us, and certainly for their advocacy on our behalf with our support. Any questions for Trustee Burgess this evening as the OPSPA Director? Seeing and hearing none, I thank you very much and wish you a restful break before we return to regular OPSPA meetings, whether that happens to be in person or still virtual. We're moving on to M3, the report of the striking committee. There is nothing further for us to do here. The only thing that I do want to mention on that report, trustees, is that there is still a vacancy. No one indicated that they wanted to be on the county or school board liaison. An alternate is needed for that. So if anybody is interested in that, just send me an email there. I've had a volunteer, Trustee Leclerc. Thank you very much. So we will add you as the county school board liaison alternate.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Trustee Halberstadt, did you have a comment?
a comment or a question?
So, no, I just heard your voice. I wasn't sure whether you had a
Oh,
comment
I'm
or
sorry.
question.
I was offline.
That's all right. Not a problem.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm moving through the agenda here to chair's report. I don't have much of a report this evening. I've only been chair for a week. Again, I want to thank my colleagues again for their support. I do want to echo some of Director Kelly's comments about wishing all of us here that gather here, all of our students, all of our staff, all of our families in the community, happy holidays, however you celebrate, and with whomever you celebrate, with the caution that we need to remain safe and to follow public health guidance, to get vaccinated, to get your boosters when you're eligible, and to really support the efforts that are being undertaken by our frontline staff, and to really kind of show our support in that way. It's a season of giving, and so we should be giving our thanks to their persistent and consistent hard work. And I invite everyone, as we are looking into some of the uncertainties of what the new year may hold, please rely on official channels from the board, our socials, our EDSB messages, for any communication about schools. I just want everybody to make sure that they're getting reliable information, and those are the places to come for reliable information. So I want to make sure that everybody has the ability to access those, or knows that where those are available to them for reliable information as we move forward. And that is the end of my chair's report. I'm wishing everyone a safe and happy holiday. Looking forward to seeing everyone, whether it's online or wherever we happen to be back in January. All right, moving to trustee question period. I see we have two trustees with questions in the queue here. Trustee Cook and then Trustee Cheen. Go ahead, Trustee Cook.
Thank you, Chair Higginson. Yeah, I have a question. I'm really confused about this, so I'm hoping to get some clarification. I've heard that teachers are handing out rapid test kits, and teachers are not allowed to take a rapid test kit themselves. So that's my first question is, are teachers allowed to take home a rapid test kit?
I don't know if Superintendent Allwender would like to add this through you, Madam Chair, or Superintendent Armstrong, but I believe the intention of the kits is for students. Do others want to add to that?
Superintendent Allwender, are you with us? Superintendent Armstrong, I see you're popped up here.
Certainly, thank you. I'd start the answer, and then certainly Superintendent Allwender can chime in. So the ministry directive, what they did was they shipped test kits to match the enrollment for the board. And so the test kits are intended by ministry directive for students to take home and to do their testing. It is voluntary for purposes of a student, but there are none that have been provided by the Ministry of Education, or have we been directed to provide any to staff. There are processes in place for staff that are not vaccinated or have not shared their vaccination status for them to conduct testing, and that is done through the Human Resources Department. And maybe I'll just stop and let Superintendent Allwender finish the answer.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly what it is. We received these. The one thing too, I was actually on the health unit with the health unit a few times tonight as we're in our meeting here, and they had mentioned to me, they wanted to reiterate that it's the Ministry of Education that has put these out, these RAT tests, because apparently a number of people are calling them to give them extra kits for the adults in the family, but this initiative has nothing to do with the Ministry of Health. So I'll just share that part, because what Director Kelly and Superintendent Armstrong said is exactly right. These were given. I think we received around 37,000 of them, if I'm not mistaken, and we have 36,000 and let's say 500, 600 kids in our system. So that's what they were intended for, is the students.
And I appreciate that. And I know it's coming down from the ministry. I just think that they missed the boat on this one. You know, to make sure our teachers, our education, all education staff are safe throughout the holidays. Those kits can be used for a variety of reasons if they're getting together with people coming in the house. I mean, everybody knows that. I just think it's a shame that and I'm not directing this to our leadership, but that the ministry does not respect, this is the way I'm taking it, our educational staff enough to provide rapid test kits to them. Where I work, anybody can go get a rapid test kit, and I just got mine today. And they should have been provided. I just think it's a shame that our educational staff has not been provided with rapid test kits. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Cook. I know that was one of OPSPA's advocacies on our behalf today to the ministry as well, that rapid test kits be provided by the ministry to staff in our boards as well. So that advocacy has come through OPSPA as well. On our behalf. So I just wanted to note that is already in the works there. So thank you for pointing that out. I have had a bit of a switch here in the order of questions. Thank you to Trustee Cheen. Trustee Hatfield had a question that was on this same topic, but Trustee Cheen has allowed her to go first. So go ahead, Trustee Hatfield, and then Trustee Cheen.
Thank you. So I'm glad Trustee Cook asked the question. I wish also that we could provide them to staff. But I was very concerned to hear from a mom that said that there was stuff all over social media about parents throwing the kits in the garbage and laughing and making jokes about them. So I don't know how the kits were distributed and what kind of, I guess, education went along with providing the kits to our students, because it was very disturbing to hear that in some cases they might have been treated as a joke. That was very upsetting.
That is quite unfortunate. Director Kelly?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. That is disturbing to hear. They're for a purpose, and to be destroying them or whatever would be, you know, that's disturbing to hear. I do believe there was information sent with each kit, a letter from that came from the ministry on specifically how to use them, and there was information sent. Superintendent Allwender, I know, or Ms. Armstrong were perhaps involved in that, but there was information sent with them, and it was certainly widely shared around with the ministry information that these kits would be coming. So that's really disturbing to hear when they could have been used by somebody.
So through you, Madam Chair?
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, no, I agree. It is very disturbing. Unfortunately, you know, I guess people have certain beliefs, and I respect people's beliefs, but there was very explicit instructions that were given out with the kits, both for what the purpose was and also how to use them. So I don't know, I guess we can't control what goes on in everybody's home at some point.
Right, yeah, thank you.
On that, if I could add just one little question, the instructions that were given, are they translatable into other languages as well? Is there a spot on somewhere where they can access them in different languages?
Yeah, so they were sent out. I believe it was Arabic, Somalia, and Mandarin. Is my understanding.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Sorry to butt in there. Trustee Cheen, did you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is very quick. I just heard that parents talking about that we are planning to go back to online teaching next semester. I want a clarification about it. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, there have been no decisions made about, are you talking about in January?
Yeah.
Yeah, in January. There are rumors of that, but there has been no decision made about that. Hopefully we'll be in a good place that doesn't happen. But then again, we've got to wait and anticipate where we are, but there has been no decision made about that. People are maybe hypothesizing whatever might happen, but we need to wait and find what the medical officer of health locally says and also the data around that. So no decisions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for asking that. I think there's a lot of people wondering that, so I really appreciate us being able to inform the public on that. Trustee Sipcar, do you have a question?
I had a question on that actually to Director Kelly. Are we instructing staff and students to bring things home in a similar fashion as we were to previous breaks? I'm seeing chatter about that across the province from other boards, and I'm just wondering, in light of us not knowing, have there been any instructions given?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, there indeed have been instructions given to principals and to staff to ensure that their students are aware, how to log in, that they take information, their stuff home. But again, we'll be communicating that tomorrow, I believe. Superintendent Mills and I talked about maybe that's something that should go out with other messaging that we have. But yes, schools have been instructed just to be prepared and to make sure that they have the materials at home should they be needed and we end up in that situation.
Thank you. Oh, thank you for that. Any other questions from trustees?
Yes, Madam Chair, I have a question.
Go ahead, Trustee Halberstadt.
Yeah, it relates to what the previous speakers were talking about, and that is, I guess, the fear of going back to all virtual. But my question has to do with the numbers of our students and staff that are being sent home on a daily basis. It's like a stream that never ends. And I don't know what the number is now. It's not just our board, but in this area, in this region, well over, I think it's 14,000 have been sent home. I guess it raises a question with me is how do we measure, what are the yardsticks that health unit and we use as far as when is a good time or when is a time to send kids home and staffing home, and as far as getting them back into school. I've heard that some other boards have very little trouble with this. And I just heard the other day that Kingston is closing schools. So I guess it's from both ends, but it seems like we're at the high end of that. I just wonder, do the boards across the province use the same yardsticks or measurements on when to designate somebody as having a high risk, and if there's one or two students or staff that is affected, that it can go up to 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 to 1. And I don't pretend to understand how that happens, but I wouldn't mind a session to ask some questions from the health unit. But anyway, I put that question out there, and I wonder if somebody can. The main question is: are we measuring the same as other school boards with regard to sending kids home, bringing them back, maybe not in a timely fashion?
Director Kelly and maybe Superintendent, I wonder.
Yeah, I'll start, Superintendent. I wonder you can please join me because we both have conversations with the health unit on a regular basis. A couple things we want you to know that we're looking at what are the processes right now and looking at ways that we can ensure that students and staff are returned to school in a faster method. It's obvious that the health unit is very overwhelmed. There's been a lot of cases, but we are looking at processes that may streamline that and make that more effective. As far as us compared to other boards in terms of what we're doing, case counts really do matter in this, and so timing and the testing that occurs if you have a lot of cases really obviously takes a lot of time. I don't know that we're distinctly different than any other school jurisdiction, but Superintendent Allwander, I'm sure you have some insights to add. I think this is probably most of what you think about all the time.
Yeah, it's what I love to think about every day. No, it's yeah. I want to say across the province, it differs a little bit between health units, but overall it's similar. But then the differences, I believe, come because of the case counts, because of the, they look at the contact tracing. Is it just a single individual that was affected, or was it somebody in the same class that created an outbreak? Is it an entire school that has to shut down because there's a whole bunch? When we've had some schools that have had a number of students that were positive, and you would think, looking at a piece of paper, that, oh, that's definitely it's an outbreak in the school. But the reality is, and they even mentioned it, I think provincially somewhere that I read, a lot of what's happening is it's community. So it's going to the, and I'm not saying people shouldn't be doing it, it's their choice, but it's community hockey tournaments and other kind of tournaments like that might be occurring on the weekend or throughout the week. Quite frankly, our schools are, in my opinion, I'm one person here, I believe they're very safe because of all the measures that we put into place. I would consider them, other than isolating in a room by yourself, probably one of the safest places you could be. So it doesn't mean that we're not sending kids home, but as far as the measures go, Trustee Halver said it is similar across the province. Case counts make a difference. We have some school boards that have had 2 or 3 this entire year. We're much different than that. So, I think based on that, the rules, expectations, what is expected, trying to reduce what's happening so that the kids can stay in school is how our health unit looks at things like that.
Okay, thank you. I just hope it gets better. I know everybody wants it to get better, but yeah, I guess we'll see in the new year what happens, and hopefully it will start going in the right direction for us.
Could not agree more, Trustee Halberstadt. Thank you very much for that. Trustee Leclerc, do you have a question?
I do, Madam Chair. Thank you. My question is related to teachers that are virtual academy teachers. Are they teaching from school, or are they teaching from home?
They're teaching from school.
Okay, with the most recent guidance from the province, have we considered that they probably should be teaching from home?
That's something that we would look into for the new year. But again, that's a recommendation. We believe that the precautions at the school are good with the PPE and also the barriers that are there for staff. But again, we may have to re-examine that as we move into the new year. We'll be talking about a lot of things about COVID as we move into the new year.
Very much. Trustee Subkarsi, you have a question here, but if that one could go through as an email, it's only allowed one question during trustee question period. So if you could send that through email, copying the rest of trustees, that would be great. Any other trustees with Trustee Burgess? Did you have a question?
Yes, Madam Chair, it's actually on an elaboration of my colleague's question. I watch every single update from the Windsor-Essex County Health Unit. I hear very clearly from our interim medical officer of health, Dr. Nesarathe, that he said we are encouraging every organization, every business who has employees who can work from home to work from home. Right now, with our case numbers, with our predicted modeling, with the added restrictions. So that's very clear. He makes it every single time there's a video, and we do have that opportunity. So I'm going to kind of double down on the question. If we have the opportunity, we're not talking about students who are, sent home. These are virtual students. These are students that are never going to be in a building because they themselves and their parents and caregivers, guardians have chosen virtual learning. Why would we not have our employees teach from home? which is a very clear direction from WeChew.
I think I've answered the question. That was something we will certainly discuss as we move forward, and that would involve quite a large group as well in other areas, the board office, for example. And again, that's something we'll consider. We've done a lot of work with the barriers, the extra levels of protection, but again, with something we'll be re-examining. Thank you.
Thanks. I look for the updates.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from trustees during trustee question period? Seeing and hearing none. Any notices of motion this evening? Do we have any notices of motion? Or Trustee Cook, if you could send your question in through email as well. We have one question during trustee question period. So if you can send your question to administration copying trustees, that would be great. Any notices of motion? Seeing and hearing none, I'll move forward through our agenda to announcements. Do any trustees have announcements this evening in our final meeting of 2021? Seeing and hearing none, I will declare our meeting adjourned, and I want to wish everyone the happiest, the safest, the most relaxing of holidays, and thank you very much for your work and your dedication and your hearts. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone.